Have you ever posed as someone's fiancé to fool their parents and ended up framed for murder? I met Olivia Sutton at a wedding where I was bartending to make rent. She approached the bar at midnight, mascara smudged, holding an empty champagne glass and looking at her phone with the kind of desperation that precedes bad decisions. "I need the strongest thing you can make," she said, not looking up. "My mother just texted that she's flying in tomorrow with my father to meet my fiancé. The fiancé who doesn't exist because I made him up 6 months ago to get her to stop setting me up with her friend's awful sons." I poured her a whiskey neat and slid it across. "That's rough. Why not just tell her the truth?" She finally looked at me, and I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "You don't understand. My family has expectations, standards. My older sister married a senator. My brother runs a hedge fund. I'm a social worker making $40,000 a year, and according to my mother, I'm the family embarrassment. The fake fiancé was supposed to buy me time to figure out my life without constant judgment." She downed the whiskey in one gulp. "Now I have 18 hours to produce a man who doesn't exist or admit I've been lying for half a year." I should have stayed behind that bar, should have wished her luck and moved on to the next customer. But something about the desperation in her voice, the way she was clearly drowning in family pressure she couldn't escape, made me open my mouth without thinking. "What if I helped you? Just for the weekend. I could pretend to be your fiancé, meet your parents, and then you can tell them later it didn't work out." Olivia stared at me. "You're a bartender I just met. Why would you do that?" I shrugged. "Because I understand family pressure. My parents wanted me to be a lawyer. I'm bartending while trying to write a novel they think is a waste of time. I get what it's like when your family can't accept who you are." She studied my face for a long moment. "This is insane. I don't even know your name." I extended my hand across the bar. "David Reeves, 29, college educated, currently employed in hospitality and creative writing. I clean up well and I'm a decent actor. Your parents fly in tomorrow?" Olivia shook my hand slowly. "Tomorrow at noon. They're staying at the Meridian Hotel downtown. Dinner tomorrow night at 7 at my apartment. Can you really pull this off?" I gave her my most confident smile, the one I'd perfected for auditions before I gave up acting for writing. "Tell me everything I need to know about us. How we met, how long we've been together, what I do for a living that won't embarrass you in front of your parents." We spent the next hour at that bar while I finished my shift, creating an elaborate fiction. We'd met at a charity fundraiser where I was working as an event coordinator for a nonprofit. We'd been dating for 14 months. I proposed 3 months ago during a weekend trip to the mountains. We were planning a spring wedding. I had a business degree from State University and aspirations in nonprofit management. My parents lived in California and traveled frequently. Every detail was designed to make me seem respectable, stable, suitable. "My mother's name is Catherine," Olivia said, typing notes into her phone. "She's obsessed with appearances and social standing. My father is Richard. He's quieter but judgmental. He'll ask you about finances, career trajectory, long-term plans. They'll both scrutinize everything." The wedding reception ended at 2 in the morning. Olivia wrote her address on a cocktail napkin and told me to arrive at her apartment by 6 the next evening, dressed in business casual. "Wear something that says successful but not trying too hard. And David, if you're going to back out, do it now. Once you meet my parents, there's no easy exit." I pocketed the napkin. "I'm not backing out. I'll be there at 6. She left, and I finished cleaning up, wondering what I'd just agreed to. The answer came faster than I expected. I arrived at Olivia's apartment at 5:45, wearing slacks and a button-down shirt I'd borrowed from my roommate. The building was in an expensive part of downtown, the kind of place where doormen wore uniforms, and residents paid more in rent than I made in 3 months. Olivia answered on the first knock, and I barely recognized her. She'd transformed from the desperate woman at the bar into someone polished and composed, wearing a navy dress and pearls, her hair styled perfectly. "My parents are in the living room," she whispered. "They arrived early. Are you ready?" I stepped inside and immediately understood why Olivia had been so desperate. Her parents sat on a cream-colored sofa in a living room that looked like a furniture catalog, everything coordinated and expensive. Catherine Sutton was wearing what I estimated to be a $5,000 suit, her blonde hair lacquered into submission, her posture radiating judgment. Richard Sutton stood when I entered, tall and severe in a charcoal suit, extending his hand with the kind of firm grip designed to test your character. "You must be David," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Olivia's told us very little about you. We're eager to learn more." Catherine remained seated, examining me with eyes that missed nothing. "Olivia, darling, you didn't mention David was so tall. Good posture is important. Sit down, David. Tell us about yourself." I sat in the chair Olivia had clearly designated for me, positioned across from her parents, and launched into the fiction we'd created. I described my work in nonprofit event coordination, my business degree, my family in California. I answered Richard's questions about career goals with rehearsed confidence. I navigated Catherine's inquiries about my family's background with carefully vague details that suggested respectability without providing specifics. Dinner was catered, arriving in warming trays from a restaurant I couldn't afford. We ate salmon and asparagus while Catherine dominated the conversation, discussing Olivia's sister's recent appearance at a political fundraiser and her brother's latest business acquisition. Every sentence contained an implicit comparison that positioned Olivia as the lesser child. Of course, social work is admirable, Catherine said, her tone suggesting it was anything but. Though we'd hoped Olivia might pursue something more substantial. Law, perhaps, or medicine. But I suppose everyone finds their own path. Olivia's hand tightened on her fork. Social work is substantial, Mother. I help families in crisis. It matters. Catherine smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. Of course, dear. And now that you're engaged to David, perhaps you'll consider transitioning to something more suitable for a married woman. David, what are your thoughts on Olivia continuing to work in such a demanding field once you're married? The trap was obvious, but unavoidable. I support whatever Olivia wants to do. Her work is important to her, and I respect that. Richard leaned forward. Noble sentiment, but practically speaking, if you're planning to start a family, decisions need to be made about priorities. Have you discussed children, timeline for the wedding, financial arrangements? I glanced at Olivia, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. We're taking things one step at a time. The wedding is planned for spring, and we'll discuss family planning after we're settled. Catherine set down her wine glass with precision. Spring weddings require significant planning. Have you secured a venue, selected a caterer, sent save the dates? Olivia's face went pale. We're still finalizing details. Her mother's expression hardened. Finalizing details. Olivia, you're 32 years old. Your sister was married at 26 with her entire life mapped out. I expected better organization from you. The criticism was sharp enough to draw blood. I watched Olivia shrink under her mother's words and felt anger flare in my chest. Actually, we've been focused on more important things than venue selection, I said, keeping my voice level. Making sure our relationship is solid, our communication is strong, that we're building a foundation that matters more than table arrangements. Catherine's attention shifted to me, her gaze cold. How lovely. And what does your family think of this engagement? Your parents must be thrilled. I'd anticipated this question, but still felt my stomach tighten. They're supportive. They trust my judgment. Richard spoke up. We'd like to meet them. Perhaps we could arrange a dinner with both families before the wedding? Olivia jumped in quickly. David's parents are traveling extensively right now. They're rarely in the country. Her father's eyebrow raised. Extensively? What do they do? I improvised, drawing on the vague backstory Olivia and I had created. My father consults internationally. My mother accompanies him. They're currently in Southeast Asia. Catherine exchanged a look with her husband, the kind of silent communication that comes from decades of marriage. How convenient. And what exactly does your father consult on? The questions were becoming more pointed, more skeptical. I realized with growing dread that Catherine didn't believe me. She was testing me, looking for inconsistencies in my story, and I'd already made a mistake by being too vague. Business development, I said, trying to sound confident. He works with companies expanding into new markets. Richard pulled out his phone. Fascinating. What's his firm called? I might know some of his colleagues. I felt sweat forming at my hairline. It's a small consultancy, Reeves International Solutions. I'd made up the name on the spot, gambling that it was generic enough to sound real. Richard was already typing into his phone. Reeves International Solutions. Let me see what comes up. My heart hammered as he scrolled through search results. After an agonizing minute, he set his phone down. Nothing appears under that name. Are you certain that's the company? Olivia intervened, her voice strained. Dad, not every business has a major online presence. David's father focuses on private clients. Catherine stood up, smoothing her skirt. This has been enlightening. Richard, I think we've learned quite enough for tonight. Olivia, we'll speak privately tomorrow morning. David, it was interesting to meet you. The dismissal was clear. I stood, shook Richard's hand again, and watched Olivia walk her parents to the door. The moment they left, she turned to me with panic in her eyes. They don't believe you. My mother's face when you couldn't give details about your father's company. She knows something's wrong. I ran my hands through my hair, adrenaline still coursing through me. I'm sorry. I should have prepared better. We should have made up more specific details. Olivia paced her living room. It's not your fault. This was a stupid plan. I should have just told them the truth from the beginning. She stopped looking at me. Thank you for trying. You can go. I'll figure out how to handle this. I should have left then. Should have walked out of that apartment and forgotten the whole evening. But something made me stay. Maybe it was the genuine fear in Olivia's eyes, or the way her parents had treated her with such casual cruelty, or the fact that I understood what it meant to disappoint your family's expectations. What if we don't give up yet? What if we shore up the story, fill in the gaps, make it bulletproof? Olivia shook her head. My mother will investigate you. She probably already has a private investigator looking into your background. By tomorrow, she'll know you're a bartender, not an event coordinator, and that your entire existence in my life is fake. Then we need to get ahead of it, control the narrative before she does. I pulled out my phone. What if something happened tonight that forces the focus away from my background? Olivia stared at me. What are you talking about? I was thinking out loud, trying to find a way to salvage this. What if there was some kind of emergency? Something that made investigating me seem less important than dealing with an immediate crisis? Before Olivia could respond, her phone rang. She looked at the screen, and her face went white. "It's my mother," she answered on speaker. Catherine's voice filled the apartment, cold and controlled. "Olivia, your father and I need you to come to our hotel immediately. There's been an incident." Olivia gripped her phone. "What kind of incident?" There was a pause. "Your brother Cameron is dead. The police are here. Someone murdered him in his hotel room an hour ago." The phone nearly slipped from Olivia's hand. I caught her as her knees buckled, her entire body going rigid with shock. Catherine's voice continued, mechanical and distant. "The police want to question everyone who had contact with Cameron today. Come now." The call ended. Olivia stood frozen in my arms, not crying, not speaking, barely breathing. "I have to go," she finally whispered. "My brother, Cameron, he can't be dead." I grabbed my jacket. "I'm coming with you." She didn't argue. We took a taxi to the Meridian Hotel, neither of us speaking during the ride. My mind was racing. Olivia's brother murdered on the same night I met her parents. The timing was horrific, suspicious, impossible to ignore. When we arrived, the hotel lobby was full of police officers. A detective intercepted us at the elevator. "Olivia Sutton?" Olivia nodded, still in shock. The detective's expression was professionally sympathetic. "I'm Detective Ramsey. I'm very sorry for your loss. I need to ask you some questions." "And you are?" He looked at me. "David Reeves, Olivia's fiancé." Detective Ramsey wrote something in his notebook. "When did you last see Cameron Sutton?" Olivia's voice came out hoarse. 3 weeks ago, at a family dinner. What happened to him?" Ramsey gestured toward the elevator. "Let's talk upstairs. Your parents are waiting." We rode up in silence. The hallway outside Cameron's hotel room was cordoned off with yellow tape. Police photographers moved in and out. Catherine and Richard stood near the door. Catherine, supported by her husband, her perfect composure finally shattered. When she saw Olivia, she pulled away from Richard and grabbed her daughter's arms. "They killed him. Someone stabbed him multiple times. The hotel security footage shows someone entering his room at 9:30 and leaving at 10. The police think it was premeditated." Detective Ramsey cleared his throat. "Mrs. Sutton, let's not speculate. Mrs. Sutton, can you account for your whereabouts between 9 and 10 this evening?" Olivia blinked, processing the question. "I was at my apartment, with David, and my parents. We had dinner." Ramsey looked at me. "Can you confirm that?" I nodded. "We were all together from 7 until about 9:15 when Mr. and Mrs. Sutton left." The detective made more notes. "And after they left?" Olivia answered. "David and I stayed at my apartment. We talked for about 20 minutes, then he was going to leave. We were still there when my mother called." Ramsey studied us both. "Did either of you have any conflict with Cameron Sutton recently?" Olivia shook her head. "No, we weren't particularly close, but there was no conflict." The detective turned to me. "Mr. Reeves, had you met Cameron before tonight?" I felt everyone's attention shift to me. "No, this was my first time meeting Olivia's family." Ramsey's pen paused over his notebook. "First time? But you're engaged." Catherine's voice cut through. "That's because David isn't really Olivia's fiancé. He's an actor she hired to fool us. I had him investigated this afternoon when his story didn't add up. His name is David Reeves. He's a bartender and failed writer, and he's been lying about everything since the moment we met him." The accusation hung in the air. I felt my face flush as Ramsey's expression shifted from professional sympathy to suspicion. "Is this true?" Olivia couldn't meet anyone's eyes. "Yes. I'm sorry. I panicked about my mother's expectations, and I made a terrible decision." Ramsey looked at me coldly. "So you had never met the victim before tonight. You lied about your identity and relationship to the family, and you were present in the building around the time of the murder." "I didn't kill anyone," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was with Olivia at her apartment the entire evening." The detective wasn't convinced. "We'll need to verify that. Don't leave town, Mr. Reeves." He turned to Olivia. "You either." Over the next 3 days, Cameron's murder consumed everything. The media picked up the story because of the family's prominence. Richard Sutton's hedge fund connections meant business networks paid attention. Cameron's own reputation as a financial prodigy made his death newsworthy. And the detail that Olivia's fake fiancé had been present the night of the murder added a salacious angle that reporters loved. I was questioned twice more by Detective Ramsey, each interview longer and more aggressive than the last. My alibi was weak. Olivia and I claimed we were together, but we'd only known each other for 24 hours before Cameron died. There was no documentation, no witnesses, nothing to prove we'd been at her apartment during the murder. The hotel security footage showed a figure entering Cameron's room at 9:30, wearing a dark jacket and jeans. The person's face wasn't visible, but the build was similar to mine. The murder weapon was never found. On the 4th day after Cameron's death, Detective Ramsey called me to the police station for what he called a formal statement. My roommate Jason drove me, worried about the, increasingly serious tone of the investigation. "You need a lawyer," Jason said in the parking lot. "They're building a case against you." I knew he was right. but lawyers cost money I didn't have. I walked into the station alone and was led to an interrogation room. Ramsey sat across from me with a folder full of documents. "Mr. Reeves, we've been investigating Cameron Sutton's murder thoroughly. Some interesting facts have emerged." He opened the folder. "Cameron's phone records show he received a call from a number registered to you at 8:45 on the night he died. Care to explain that?" My mind went blank. "That's impossible. I never called him. I didn't have his number." Ramsey pushed a phone log across the table. There was my number, clear as day, calling Cameron's phone at 8:45. The call lasted 3 minutes. "I didn't make that call. Someone must have cloned my number or used a spoofing app." The detective's expression said he'd heard it all before. "We also pulled your financial records. You're $32,000 in debt, behind on student loans, working a minimum wage job, barely making rent. Cameron Sutton was worth approximately $8 million. I felt the walls closing in. You think I killed him for money? I didn't even know him. I had no way of benefiting from his death." Ramsey leaned back. "Unless Olivia Sutton put you up to it, unless the fake engagement was a setup to get you close to the family, establish your presence, create an opportunity, maybe she promised you a cut of the inheritance." The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. "That's insane. Olivia loved her brother. She's destroyed by his death." Ramsey pulled out another document. "Olivia Sutton is the primary beneficiary of Cameron's life insurance policy, $2 million. The policy was updated 6 months ago, right around the time she claims to have gotten engaged to her fictional fiancé." My blood went cold. She never mentioned that. I had no idea. The detective stood up. "David Reeves, I'm placing you under arrest for the murder of Cameron Sutton. You have the right to remain silent." The arrest made headlines. Failed writer arrested in hedge fund heir murder. Social worker's fake fiancé charged with killing her brother. The stories painted me as a desperate grifter who'd infiltrated a wealthy family to commit murder. I was held in county jail, unable to afford bail set at $500,000. Jason tried to help, setting up a crowdfunding page that raised $3,000 before being shut down due to negative publicity. I was assigned a public defender named Margaret Strauss, a woman in her 50s who looked permanently exhausted. "The evidence against you is substantial," she said during our first meeting in a jail conference room. "The phone call from your number, your presence in the hotel, your lack of legitimate alibi, the financial motive. The prosecution is going to argue you and Olivia conspired to kill her brother for insurance money." I gripped the edge of the table. "I didn't kill anyone. I don't know how my number was used to call Cameron. I was never in that hotel room." Margaret reviewed her notes. "The problem is proving that. Olivia's confirmed you were with her at the apartment, but her testimony is compromised because she's also under suspicion. She's being called a co-conspirator." "Have they arrested her too?" I asked. "Not yet, but the police are watching her closely. If they can flip her testimony against you, make her say this was your idea, she might avoid charges." I felt sick. "She wouldn't do that. She knows I'm innocent." Margaret's expression was skeptical. "People do a lot of things when they're facing murder charges. If the prosecution offers her immunity in exchange for testimony, she might take it to save herself." I spent the next week in jail trying to make sense of what had happened. Someone had framed me meticulously. The phone call from my number, the security footage showing someone my size, the timing that placed me near the murder scene. This wasn't random. This was calculated. But who had done it, and why? I got my answer on day 8 of my incarceration. Margaret arrived at the jail, visibly shaken. "We have a problem. Olivia Sutton has been arrested." My heart stopped. "For what?" Margaret sat down heavily. "Murder, but not Cameron's murder. The police found evidence that she killed her father." The news was incomprehensible. "Richard Sutton is dead?" Margaret nodded. "Found in his hotel room this morning with the same method of death as Cameron. Multiple stab wounds. And this time there's clear evidence. Hotel cameras show Olivia entering his room at 2 a.m. Her fingerprints are on the murder weapon recovered at the scene." I couldn't process what I was hearing. Olivia couldn't have killed her father. She was devastated by her brother's death. Why would she murder her own family? Margaret pulled out newspaper clippings. "The police have a theory. They think she killed Cameron for his insurance money, and when her father discovered what she'd done, she killed him to prevent exposure. They're saying she's a psychopath who's been manipulating everyone, including you." I shook my head violently. "No, Olivia isn't capable of this. Someone's setting her up just like they set me up." Margaret looked at me seriously. "David, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Is there any possibility Olivia manipulated you from the beginning? That meeting you at that wedding wasn't random? That she specifically chose you to be her fall guy?" The question hit me hard because I'd been asking myself the same thing. Had Olivia orchestrated everything? She'd approached me at the bar, told me about her fake fiancé problem, convinced me to help her meet her parents on the exact night her brother would be murdered. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. "I don't know," I admitted. "I thought I was helping someone desperate, but maybe I was the mark all along." Margaret gathered her files. "The prosecution is going to use your connection to Olivia to strengthen their case against you. They're arguing you were her accomplice in both murders. I was being tried for murders I didn't commit, framed by someone who'd used me as a weapon. 2 days later, everything changed again. Margaret came to see me with news that turned the case on its head. Richard Sutton isn't dead. The murder was staged. I stared at her. What? Margaret's expression was grim. The body found in Richard's hotel room wasn't Richard. It was a John Doe, someone roughly his age and build, killed to look like Richard. The real Richard Sutton disappeared the morning after his son's murder. Why would Richard stage his own death? I asked. Margaret leaned forward. Because he killed Cameron, and he's been framing both you and Olivia to cover his tracks. She pulled out new documents. The police finally did a deep dive into Richard's finances. His hedge fund was collapsing. He'd lost nearly everything in bad investments and was facing fraud charges from his investors. Cameron discovered the fraud and threatened to expose him. Richard killed his own son to prevent that exposure and to collect on Cameron's life insurance. The revelation was staggering. And he framed me because I was the perfect scapegoat, an outsider, a liar, someone with no credibility. Margaret nodded. He used your phone number to call Cameron, probably with spoofing software. He wore similar clothes to you for the security footage. He planted evidence making it look like you were the killer. Then when Olivia started defending you, he decided to frame her too by staging his own murder and leaving evidence pointing to her. I felt rage building. Where is he now? Margaret's expression darkened. That's the problem. Richard Sutton has vanished. Interpol has issued a warrant, but he had time to plan his escape. He could be anywhere. The charges against me were dropped 5 days later, but the damage was done. My face had been on every news channel as a suspected murderer. My name was destroyed. Jason let me stay on his couch while I tried to rebuild my life, but job applications went unanswered. My manuscript was rejected by the last agent who'd been considering it, citing reputational concerns. The wedding industry where I'd worked blacklisted me. Olivia was released from jail the same day I was. The charges against her had been dropped when Richard's fraud came to light. We met at a coffee shop 3 weeks after everything fell apart. 2 people who'd been chewed up by someone else's criminal schemes. She looked thin, haunted, aged by what she'd endured. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I never imagined my father would do any of this. I brought you into my family's nightmare, and you paid the price. I wanted to be angry with her, but I couldn't. She'd lost her brother, and her father had been accused of murdering both, had watched her family's legacy destroyed. It's not your fault. Your father made his choices. Olivia wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. The FBI thinks he's in South America somewhere. He liquidated hidden accounts and fled the country before anyone realized what was happening. My mother's in a psychiatric facility. She broke completely when she learned Richard killed Cameron. We sat in silence. 2 strangers who'd been bound together by tragedy. What are you going to do now? Olivia asked. I thought about that question. My old life was gone, burned to ashes by Richard Sutton's schemes. I don't know. Start over somewhere, change my name maybe, try to disappear. Olivia nodded. I'm moving to Oregon. My sister is there. She's the only family I have left. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thank you for believing me when everyone else thought I was a killer. I squeezed back. Thank you for believing me. We left that coffee shop and went our separate ways. 6 months later, I was working at a bookstore in Seattle under a new name when the news broke. Richard Sutton had been found dead in a hotel room in Buenos Aires. Murdered. Multiple stab wounds. The same method he'd used to kill his son. The investigation revealed that Cameron Sutton had hired a private investigator months before his death, documenting Richard's fraud. That investigator, a man named Thomas Vega, had been searching for Richard ever since Cameron's murder. He'd found him in Argentina and delivered justice the legal system couldn't. I never learned if Vega was arrested. The news reports were vague, and I stopped following the story after confirming Richard was dead. Some part of me felt vindicated, knowing Richard had faced consequences for what he'd done. But mostly I just felt tired. I rebuilt slowly. The bookstore promoted me to manager. I started writing again, different stories now, darker and more real. Olivia sent me a card on the anniversary of Cameron's death, postmarked from Oregon. She'd started a nonprofit helping victims of family violence. She'd turned her trauma into purpose. I never pretended to be anyone's fiancé again. Never took on someone else's problems thinking I could help without consequences. I learned that some lies, even well-intentioned ones, can destroy everything. And I learned that families can be the most dangerous places in the world when money and expectations collide. 3 years after that night at the wedding, I published my first novel under my real name. It was about a man who agrees to help a stranger and ends up framed for murder he didn't commit. The book became a bestseller. People praised its authenticity, its emotional truth. They had no idea how much of it was real. Olivia called me when the book came out. You told our story, she said. I changed the names and enough details to protect us. But yes, the core is real. I needed to write it to process what happened. She was quiet for a moment. Thank you for making it matter, for turning our nightmare into something that might help other people understand how easily lives can be destroyed. We talked for an hour, catching up, sharing how we'd rebuilt. Then we said goodbye, knowing we probably wouldn't speak again. Some connections are forged in trauma, and can't survive in peace. I still think about that night sometimes, about walking into Olivia's apartment as a fake fiancé, about meeting Richard Sutton and shaking his hand, about having no idea I was meeting a murderer who would try to destroy my life. I think about how close I came to spending my life in prison for crimes I didn't commit, how fragile innocence is when someone powerful decides you're expendable. But mostly I think about how I survived, how Olivia survived, how we both refused to let Richard Sutton's evil define us permanently. Justice came eventually, even if it came through unconventional means. And we both found ways to live with what we'd endured. That's not the ending I would have written if this were just fiction. But it's the ending I got, and I've learned to accept it. Sometimes survival is the only victory that matters. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.